Welcome, everybody. Welcome. Please find a seat. My name is Peter Wanders. I'm the president and CEO of Anderson Ranch. On behalf of our trustees and amazing staff that work here, I want to thank all of you for coming. I want to thank the National Council for making the ranch possible. We really appreciate all that you do. It has been an amazing week so far. Anybody here on Monday? I mean, it was stunning to see Jason popping up from the stage and over to play the piano. Amazing events in town this week. The Aspen Art Fair at the Jerome has been a really great partner of the ranch. We have our edition prints are on display there. Intersect Aspen, there's a booth with the Anderson Ranch edition. So as you're around town, please explore, check in. The fairs have a little sign actually that says a ranch-related artist is on display, so you can talk to them about the ranch. We're super excited about all the things going on and especially excited for Aspen Art Museum. Have really great events this week, and we're so excited about their program tonight on the top of Aspen Mountain. And then, again, their dinner on Friday. So excited by all the things going on, and excited to have you all take the time to come over here today and enjoy it. This series is underwritten by the Lewis family, Mel and Adam, in honor of Toby Lewis. I know many of you had a personal relationship with Toby, as I did. Such a special person. She was a trustee of the ranch and a longtime friend. So I really appreciate what the Lewises do to make that possible. We have series of individuals who are sponsors of the summer series, so I'm going to read their names out real quickly. Really appreciate what they do to make this specific series possible. Sarah Arison and Tom Willems, Jill and Jay Bernstein, Rona and Jeff Citron, Ann Cook and Charlie Moss, Eleanor and Domenico Di Soleil, Sherry and Joe Felson, Barbara and John Lee, Liza and John Mauk, Katie and Amnon Rodan, Lee and Reggie Smith, Ellen Sussman. I really appreciate the special support you give to this program. Specifically, we have a few corporate sponsors. One is Cultured Magazine, have been sponsors of the ranch for many years. Sarah Harrelson helped put together this year's series, so a really special shout out to them. Christie's Auction House here. I think some of the Pure Insurance people are here. They're both sponsors of the summer series and specifically helped us do some hosting of Derek this week, and I really appreciate it. A great welcome last night to the, thank you to the Greenbergs for welcoming Derek to town and making that a special welcome for him. United Airlines is a partner for the entire summer series. Rich and Brian are here in the middle. Thank you. They rarely actually make it up. They're all over the country. These two represent the major ski markets across the United States for United. But a shout out, they both help us bring the speakers in for the series. But what is really amazing is they also bring in a lot of our scholarship students throughout the workshops, throughout the entire summer series. They're super generous, and I really appreciate them being here. If you want to know anything about United, like when we're going to get a direct flight to New York, they're your people. Go ask them. So we, after the program, I know there are a lot of people here from the art fairs and from Art Week events. We're going to do some tours of the studios guided by the artistic team. If you wander out here by the fence after the talk, Andrea, Betsy, Liz are going to walk some people through campus, and we'd love to have you join. The workshops are doing some amazing things, and they can kind of show you what happens in there. The magic of what happens for those students going through that workshop with that faculty member one-on-one with their own work is a transformational experience for so many of our participants, and it helps drive those artistic programs forward. Those students in there right now, from RISD, from St. Louis, from a community college down the road, they're going to be up here in 10 years, so go see what they're doing. They're really growing in their programs, and their artistic practice is amazing. So we'll get to our speaking. Sophia is here to lead our program today. She is an advisor working with artists, clients, institutions, curating really exceptional projects. She chairs both Guggenheim's Young Collectors Council and the Milken Institute's Young Leaders Circle. So we appreciate you being here to lead our conversation with Derek. We'll give you a hand for that. Derek needs no introduction, but when you say that, you still have to then introduce something, right? So we're excited to have you here, Derek. Born in Memphis, Tennessee, graduate of Morehouse College, master's degree in education, art education from Harvard University. So we're excited to have you at our educational organization, and an MFA in painting from Hunter College. He has works held in a lot of major collections around the country, personal and public. The Studio Museum of Harlem, Guggenheim Museum, Metropolitan Museum of Art, SF MoMA, Brooklyn Museum, Perez Museum, Whitney Museum, LACMA. So everywhere excited, some amazing projects, installation in Paris right now at the Louis Vuitton. So we're going to learn a lot more about Derek from Sophia, but thank you, and I will pass over to you. Thank all of you for coming.
Well, hi, everyone. When Derek and I were thinking about this talk, we obviously have worked together for Silver Arts projects. We were on the committee to pick the next cohort, so it feels very fitting that we are at Anderson Ranch looking at these amazing students. We had an amazing tour yesterday.
Amazing.
Yeah, and seeing Derek interact with the students, kind of having that education background, and also just your excitement about the ideas of what can happen when you give artists an opportunity to learn and give them the space to kind of explore different mediums. And so I think we both feel very grateful to be here, and we're sad Sarah's not here, but she's a connector also between us, and we thank her for that.
Big time. Yeah, I just want to say thank you to all of you. One of my biggest nightmares is that I have a talk and nobody shows. But I don't have to be concerned with that.
No. I don't have that nightmare.
No, it's great people. It's amazing. Also, I didn't know this week would be so good for my self-esteem. So you've all been very kind to me about my work, and I'm just so grateful. So we can talk shop, but I just want you to know I feel like I'm among friends.
Yeah, I agree. And it's been fun spending time together and exploring this and thinking about all the possibilities that we can do in the future together as well.
Yeah.
But in terms of kind of what I was referencing before, which is giving artists a space to explore their practice and also look at different types of practices they might want to explore, whether it be digital, ceramics, I really wanted to start this conversation talking about materiality. And if you are familiar with Derek's work, he really plays with the idea of different materials and kind of what constitutes a painting. And I really thought this was a great segue from what we saw yesterday to kind of get into what we're going to talk about today.
Yes, well, I think that the best artists kind of break the rules. And what you see in my paintings really are probably the culmination of all my anxiety around painting. I was never, and we have many painters here, right? We have painters. Okay, so the painters are special people because you have to mix your colors and be very studious and almost, it's a chemical process. And I really had none of that patience. So what you see in my work really is an accumulation of surfaces that are added up with cardboard, glue, newspaper. It takes about 2 weeks before I can actually start on the surface. There's like kind of epidermis and dermis, so lots of layers underneath it. And I use aluminum foil and acrylic and pastel to kind of make that surface.
Yeah. And, let's kind of talk about this painting in general. I think as we're talking about materiality, I think it's important to talk about what materials exactly you might be using in something like this.
Yes. Well, everything I mentioned is there. This painting was done, I think, in 2020. And I had a big show planned at Petzl. I think it was my first show in New York. And then COVID happened. It really was a lesson in perseverance because you spend a year making a show and to know that no one is going to come is kind of heartbreaking, but it also repositions you to remember what you're working for, and you're kind of your first audience. This work really happened when all the protests were happening and athletes were starting to speak out on their platforms, on Twitter, and the protests looked different because, we kind of romanticized protests from the 60s when corporations didn't help you protest. But in this era, and I don't mean this to be facetious, but I think the terrain is a lot more complicated for athletes that wanted to use their voice. So I think my paintings became more active. You see number 7 on the chest. That came from Colin Kaepernick. You see an upturned trophy, which kind of became a symbol of a kind that, you kind of risk it. And then there's a kind of dunce-like element to the figure altogether, a kind of court jester element, which is a lot of kind of how I feel in the public space. But all these questions about, how you can have integrity and do your work and lend a voice and not risk too much, it all kind of culminates in this sort of emotion for me.
Yeah. We can go to the next slide. So kind of going on that theme of sports, maybe we'll get into that a little bit later, but the concepts of sports, the idea of people coming together on a team.
Right.
And so I think in this picture, I really want to discuss the idea of team and how that can kind of transcend a sport or kind of secure organization and make it more into the the home or, entrepreneurs, or what does it mean to be on a team, and what does that mean for you in this?
Love that. This painting is entitled Mayweather Catering Company, and I love that they look like domestics, and they're dressed like domestics, and most of us would think that when we see them. In fact, this was one of my early heroes in Memphis where I grew up. We didn't have lots of very famous artists, but this woman who's at the stove, Miss Mayweather, had a catering company, and she cooked lunch every day for a businessman named Fred Smith, who started a small company called Federal Express. And to go from South Memphis, which there's some Memphians here that know, all the way to East Memphis to serve such a powerful man as a young boy, it really made an impression on me. So some of the heroes I looked at were entrepreneurs. She also worked with her hands. I also think about this as kind of a self-portrait in that she's still cooking at the stove, but she's also overseeing and managing her team who's also cooking. And for artists that work with a team, this is what we do. We make our work, we work with other artists. And so I think about this also as a team in that sense and what it takes to make work happen. I love in this piece that, I don't know, we got art people in here. Can you guys see the references? Let's say who it is together. Who's that? Alma Thomas. Okay, one we got right. What about this one? Not you can show in a bar. Yeah, I love him though. No, this is Lois Mylou Jones, who taught at Howard University for a long time. And talking about teams, Sophia, I love to use an alternate canon. How about that?
Yeah.
Lynette Yadomboache. How about this one? This is not fair. It's half a painting. Micheline Thomas. And what about this sculpture? Simone Lee. So I like to say about this painting that I'm certain there's not another painting in which a man has referenced 5 women artists.
I can't remember one.
Okay?
I'd have to agree with that.
Right?
Yeah, it's pretty good.
And then when we go to black artists, it becomes a thing. But you see that in the kitchen, Alma Thomas and Lois Mylou Jones are kind of in the kitchen. But in the party, where the action is happening, you have these younger artists that enjoy careers. So this painting did a lot in terms of, commenting on, team dynamics, self-portraiture, referencing my home and history, and, team becomes a bigger concept in this kind of context.
Yeah, and even if you want to expand on that, like who got the credit, and
Yes.
so the idea that the people in the kitchen are the ones that are still working towards it, and then the ones in these kind of alcoves are the representation of who made it or
Big time. I mean, most of my time in life, and that's true for a lot of artists in here, we're in the studio, and it's not glamorous. It's not this. It's muck and mire. And then you spend a little time, in the party. But most of the time is sort of working in the kitchen, cooking,
Great.
What's that? Oh, where's it hanging? That's a good question. Might be in a private collection, promised to a public collection, but I don't generally dabble there.
Yeah.
So have some gallery people in the audience that could probably tell you that, but yeah.
So, obviously when we did the introduction, we talked about all the museums you're in, and this painting is going to SF MoMA, which is really special. And I love looking at this and seeing kind of what it represents. And after speaking to you and kind of learning a little bit more about what you use your paintings to represent, when we spoke about this painting, we really spoke about access to space, and we talked about opportunity. And I'd love for you to kind of dive deeper, literally and figuratively.
Oh, that was good.
Come on, pretty good. I said there'd be jokes.
Here come the puns.
And but no, I think that just with when a lot of times when we look at paintings, we see one thing, but if you get to know an artist, you kind of see all the layers behind it. And so if you can get into those layers, that'd be awesome. I think everyone would want to know.
Yeah, so I'm really excited. This is going to be in a group show at SF MoMA this fall. I think it opens in October. But I had gone to Iceland and had a lovely time. And at the end of the day, the friends I was with was like, hey, let's go to the pool. And I thought, cool. And we went to a municipal pool. I mean, we maybe paid $5 or $6, and we all hang out in the pool, and everybody has space. There's beer, and it's lovely. And I'm asking, like, is this a private club? They're like, no. These are all over Reykjavik. People can just come.
Yeah.
So it wasn't a private space. And I thought, well, this is nice. I'm there. There's the butcher. There's a neighbor. Everybody's hanging. I said, wow, how nice would this be in America?
Yeah.
This would be, I thought I had an original idea, like I thought this would be fantastic. And when I did a little history, in fact, there used to be community pools in America, lots of them. And I found that the rise of the private pool was in direct response to integration of public pools. And so I love it that we can look at this painting and see leisure. Of course, some of my favorites. We can't look at this without thinking about Hockney, and there's so many references to water in art history. But for me, this painting, again, underscores the idea of team, because you have everyone wearing the same suit. And I'm always interested in that kind of involuntary grouping that happens, when you are from, an identifiable minority group. But for me, this painting was just about how profound it is to have open, free access to water, and how much currency that carries in terms of, our very complicated racial history in this country. I also think that there's an underscore of patriotism. I think about kind of the red, white, and blue, the kind of undercurrents of national identity also play in there.
Yeah. And this is a nice segue to the next piece, which is, topics that I discussed with you as well, which is movement, being one, and two, kind of, you referenced Hockney already, but your influences, right? What are you looking at when you really think of art history in your canon, and kind of how are you building off of your predecessors and people that inspire you? So I thought this would be a great work to kind of think about that.
Yes, I mean, it's such a tricky question. The artists that inspire you, I could really, spend the next 45 minutes talking about that. I think this work really shows my affinity for an artist I love very much, Wayne Thiebaud. Any Wayne Thiebaud fans out here? Okay, wonderful. I said I was amongst friends. But Wayne Thiebaud, I thought, did such an amazing job at creating iconography out of very simple, objects, cakes and pies. And somehow it felt like Americana. And so in these works, I use my experience as the graduate of a historically black college, University, Morehouse College. And I love the fact that black bands, I don't know if you've ever seen, I'm not going to start naming names because schools, that'll be a problem. But major sort of predominantly white institutions, if you watch their bands play, and then you watch historically black colleges, same uniforms, same gear, very different flavor. And that holds, to me, an aspect of Americana where you can sort of be a nation inside of a nation, use the same materials, but put a certain cultural bent on it. I find that to be part of Americana as well. Yeah.
Okay, great. And, looking at, your sculpture and thinking about that practice of yours, some things that we spoke about were fragility and vulnerability. And in this piece, you can really see just by nature how fragile this work is, that at any point it can topple over. But at the same time, when you think of those words in a big social sense, like you've been referencing, there's more to it. So I'd love to kind of use your sculpture to kind of get into that space as well.
Yeah, I think, that's a great question, Sophia. I think that, when I make paintings, maybe there's a narrative and, I'm building a picture. Sculpture, for me, is like poetry. It can just carry so many layers of meaning through simple gestures. I actually went to see the circus many years ago, and there was a company from China, and they were stacking themselves. And I was just thinking, like, oh my gosh, they could fall, And it was that gesture that kind of I kept returning to. And when I actually replicated it, I thought this actually feels a lot like me, that you're trying to add up to be enough, and it's all very fragile. And one wrong move, it can topple. One of the reasons I love being in Aspen, excuse me, is that you guys are so friendly. I don't feel the general anxiety I do hanging with collectors. And I mean that as a compliment.
It's the mountain air.
It's the mountain air. Okay, well, that makes a difference. But usually, as an artist, we have to perform in all these spaces. I have so many artist friends out here. You work in the studio, and then in the public space, there's a performance. And I find it to be quite fragile. And this painting really holds a lot of that for me.
And also in this painting too, the idea of repetition. We looked at the
Yes.
last work in the pool rather, and you had everyone in the same outfit and kind of this like repeating image yet like separation of actual form.
That's
so
right.
maybe talk a little bit about that.
Well, individuation is something I'm interested in. When you're in a body like mine, right, and you enter predominantly white spaces, there's a kind of de facto grouping that can happen where people might presume that I know the other black person in the room. Not a bad thing. Here I probably do. Not the best case, but it's that desire for individuation that I'm really interested in. When I travel, before I met my lovely wife, I traveled alone. I thought I would do that forever, and she changed that, thankfully. But sometimes when I would go to certain countries, I remember going to Australia, and I was held for 45 minutes after coming through customs. And there were questions, and I was fine for the first 15 minutes, 20 minutes. And after a while, it became clear that me looking like this, traveling with no agenda, staying for an indefinite period of time was a problem. They weren't going to look at me and think, this is a successful artist clearing his head.
Yep.
Quite the opposite. So this desire for individuation and de facto grouping is something that's underscored in all the works.
Amazing. So looking at, when we've been talking and now that I've been thinking about your work a little bit, actually this work in particular has struck me not only because I love horses and ride them, so maybe I'm completely biased, but the idea of being static, the idea of moving but not really moving anywhere. And hearing you speak about that was just inspiring because it is so profound in such like a condensed thing. So I'd love to hear more about that. Also, this is at the one that's at the Olympic show.
Yes. I'm so tempted to be dishonest, but the truth is that show was only up for 4 hours. So it was a special event that happened.
It was a moment. You missed the moment.
It was actually a moment. So, yes, I was very happy to be invited to Paris, and also Brian Donnelly, who's here, had a work there. He's a good friend. Cause. Say hello, Brian. Yes. But we were both, along with a few other artists, invited to show in Paris. But this work really has two wonderful things that I'm very attracted to. One, mobility. Think about the power of moving on a horse, how far and fast and elegant you can ride. But then a rocker, which kind of goes nowhere. And so that tension is perfect for a kind of anxiety that and don't worry, I have a therapist. I know I'm talking a lot about anxiety, but
it's me. I'm the therapist.
Yeah, right. Yes, exactly. So, but this idea of having the appearance of wealth or progress or status, but in fact being confounded to the same space, I think is really kind of a cultural marker for my experience. As an African American person, a lot of us put a lot of effort into looking like things are doing well, and there's a lot of pressure in doing that, and so some of that is bound up in this sculpture.
Yeah, I really, really love that. And this work in particular, it's a grand work. I think it holds a lot of space, and I think it actually holds a lot of space from when we spoke about your history, and the idea of migration, and the idea of movement, and maybe not being able to, and having a U.S. passport versus not. And I'm really curious to hear, like, when you look at this, you don't really see that. You maybe see the team aspect again. Right. You see the sport, but how does that kind of relate to, like, the migrational aspect of your life?
Yes. So, this sculpture, which is in Japan, which I'm very happy about, but this sculpture, I made after going home to Ghana, where my parents are from, and spending time with a cousin. And he's a bright guy. He finished university, has 2 kids, can't find a job despite his best efforts. The economy at the time was really struggling. I had another experience of traveling to Israel. And when I came through customs, there were all these families waiting for family members that were, coming from various parts of Africa. And that moment of seeing these immigrant families made me think about my own parents and their journey, and the fact that now I have an American passport and I can travel easily. There were also conversations about migration and the wall and what it means to be a group searching for peace, opportunity. I think it's something that human beings have done for a very long time. But again, that same tension that you saw in the last work, these bodies are submerged. And so these are not able bodies. This is a fragmented portion of the body. And I also like that there's a bit of a landscape aspect, or something floral even, when you take the piece in as a whole. But this piece was an occasion for me to really think about movement and migration.
Yeah, and the group still is really present. So now we're taking a little bit of a turn. I think that, as I started this conversation talking about how you come in with one thing and your brain can expand, and different types of, different art forms can contribute to the one that you come in with. And so I feel like performance has been a big part of your practice, and, this is your first performance. And
Yes.
kind of the idea of how does this interact with your paintings, how do they stand alone, and kind of what do they mean to you? And seemingly in this, we're carrying some similar themes. So
Yes.
I'd love to hear more about this work.
Yeah, so this was part of that show at Petzl that nobody saw. Did anybody here see that? Aw, that's really special. We could only see this show like 15 people at a time because of COVID. But this was my first live performance. I worked with an incredibly talented puppeteer named Nick Lahane, and I had gone to a small theater downtown in New York called Here Theater, and he had a show, Bun Raku Puppetry, and the materiality of the subject in the show compelled me. It made me think about my own material. It made me think of my own sculpture. So I begged him to have a soup with me, and we got together and just got in the room and played. And what you're saying, Sophia, about Anderson Ranch, what made me feel like I was 12 when I was here, was that I can go from a painting studio to ceramics to metals to wood, and it's like I'm on fire. And so puppetry was that. I could put my sculpture in motion. I could work with a musician on a score. I could work with staging and lighting and change the white cube of a gallery to the experience of walking into a black box theater. And all of that is the kind of illusion that, as a painter, I was attracted to, and I still am. So this is called Fly Away. It just showed in Australia at a big triennial there. And I'm really happy to share it with you guys because we didn't get to show it to too many people.
Yeah. And on this continuation of performance, I think, as you can see, that was your first performance, and now this is literally a bigger stage, right? And this was at Kordansky.
Yes.
And this kind of has this like magic show, illusion, this like big performative, historical thing, which is someone on stage kind of creating something out of nothing, right?
Yes, yes.
And so I think that I'd love to hear your perspective on how you went from kind of the puppet, where it wasn't a real person, to kind of these like grand, big performances.
That's right. So this was shown at David Kordansky Gallery maybe 2 years ago, and the title of the show was The Legend of Black Herman. And we actually worked with a real magician. I'm so sorry I can't remember his name now. I will get it before the talk is over. He's amazing. He worked at the what's that place in LA that
The Magic Castle?
you all know it, LA people.
I love the Magic Castle.
But you have to be invited to the Magic Castle.
Yeah, you have to be a magician to be a member of the Magic
So
Castle.
LA.
Yeah, it's very LA. I love
but,
it.
But he had performed for many years, and so I've worked with Numa Perrier, who's also a longtime friend, an amazing writer. She works in film and television, and together we wrote this play. it's based on a real character named Black Herman, who did live in the early 20th century in Harlem. I live in Harlem. And I'm sure he traversed the same streets, got a Harlem person out there. And so I was interested in magic allegorical to the work of an artist, because we work in the realm of illusion. And I also thought it was a great allegory for privilege, because it's a relationship between the audience and the magician that makes the trick work. You have to be willing to suspend disbelief. That's sort of what we do when we walk into museums or we walk into galleries. We have to come along for the ride. And so I'm asking, and the character is asking, do you believe me? And I think that's sort of what the desperation is around some of me talking to customs in Australia is about. Do you believe what I'm telling you?
Even the fragility of like that question,
Right. And so a lot of these are cathartic for me, a way to productively challenge, my own, negative feelings, but they turned into something fantastic. We had a great time. But I loved it that you could come into the show and see a free magic show in the middle of the day in LA. And so part of it is the artifice of putting the whole thing together. And I think about my paintings as kind of doing my homework. You got to do your homework and then you can go play. So I make my paintings, and then when I'm done and the gallery's happy, then I can play.
I love it. And the magic castle is shaking in its boots, let me tell you. The free show of it all. Okay, and kind of looking at this one last performance, I think, when we were looking at the paintings at the pool, we were looking at the jockey. There's a lot of like kind of themes of Americana in that as well. And this in particular is kind of like the stripes, the stars, the red carpet, the performance aspect of things, and really leaning into like what is a performance. And this, is a performance. So can you get into kind of then how you moved into this type of performance work?
Yes, this was my most recent show at Petzl Gallery. Did anybody see this show? All right, wonderful. Thank you for your support. This was a really ambitious show. I worked with an amazing choreographer named Sidra Bell. In fact, I've set out to find the next great choreographer I could work with. And I told my wife, who's here, Alexis, I told her at 4 o'clock in the morning one day, I kind of woke up in a sweat, and I was like, I'm going to do this show. And I saw it. And, I told her, I got to work with the choreographer. And she said, there was this wonderful young woman when I was in school who was a choreographer. Her name was Sidra Bell. You should reach out to her. And I said, like any smart husband would, no thanks. I'm going to go find the choreographer that's right for this job. And so I did that, and I found all these great choreographers through Ailey and these other contacts, and I'm having lunch with people and dinner. There was an artist, Kyle, I forget, does anybody know Kyle? Kyle Abrahams, thank you. So Kyle and I are having lunch in New York, and he's in Tokyo, he's here, he's running around, and I'm just like, Kyle, I have this idea. And he goes, you know what? I think this show would be perfect for my friend. And I said, who is he? He goes, Sidra Bell. So you can imagine that ride home.
Tail between your legs, just completely.
So I've learned to listen to my wife. That's one thing I learned from this show. But no, this show and the Americana really is about my relationship to patriotism. My parents found a lot of opportunity in America. And I know it. I see exactly how our lives change. It's also complicated to have a relationship with patriotism and to be black, knowing the history. And so this show was an attempt to sort of grapple with all of those elements. A really cool thing about the show that happened during it is that backstage between myself and the dancers, we started to have a little tension during the performance because that's a dirt floor they're on, and we were under a tent inside, and they were breathing in dirt, and it's not actually a theater. And so I have this really terrible habit of like letting my imagination drive, and then I forget about things like water.
Practical things.
Yes.
Yeah.
Gravity, like these ideas. So this started to become this kind of dark circus where like I was the overlord boss and like they were working. They're like, hey, so we canceled a lot of shows.
No water for you.
Yeah, yeah. We canceled a lot of shows, and I love it that we didn't charge people to see the show because the care of their bodies under my, kind of leadership became the very thing that we were critiquing. Yeah. How much was I going to push them in favor of the audience, and how important was the show? So I learned a lot. I really want to write about my experience making the show, but it became kind of self-referential in a way that was really illuminating for me.
Oh, that's amazing. I didn't know that.
Yeah.
So the way I wanted to, we would love to hear from your questions from you guys, but the way I wanted to end this is something that Derek said to me yesterday was, there's the artist and then there's the friend of the artist. And I think that can mean a lot of things, and we were talking about it in a little bit of a general way, but the idea that every artist needs a supporter. They need someone to champion them. They need someone to lend them a hand, maybe lend them some funds, maybe a couch to sleep on. And so the friend of the artist is almost as essential as the artist. And, ironically, we put it together, but Derek and I actually met years ago when we both were involved in this foundation called Project Reset. Project Reset is an amazing center of court innovation. Yeah, oh my God, sorry. And basically what it does is it's a day of reflection for minors that maybe have a misdemeanor crime. And instead of going into the system, which we obviously know does not serve most minority people, they have a day at a museum where they go and they speak to curators, they paint a little bit, they go to an artist studio, and they have for one day people who desperately care about their well-being, desperately care about their future, and the retention rate of not committing another crime actually was astounding. I mean, it was an amazing thing to see how the arts specifically and general care and thoughtfulness towards these younger kids that might not have that at home really allowed them to get out of a system that would eventually really underserve them moving forward. And we both feel very passionately about that. And I think this is a great segue into talking about your foundation, CAM. Yes. And maybe you can say some words about Project Reset as well.
Yes, and I want to thank you publicly because talking about the friend of the artist, I got a call from an artist named Sean Leonardo, very talented, a dear friend, who invited me to come do this work. And I thought it was about me. I had an arrest experience when I was 19 years old in New York, and I was looking at doing some serious time. And the only thing that kind of saved me was, my proximity to education, wealth. My father's a doctor, and I was able to have an audience, and I was heard. But I was this close to losing it all. And when Sean called me, I thought, well, this is a chance for me to work through my own stuff. I didn't think the kids would be impacted very much because I'm like, these kids, though, an artist studio, what's going to happen? So they came to my studio, and we would work for 3 hours. I tell them my story, and at the end of it, they said the most amazing things, like, I felt relaxed. I was able to think about my choices because making art is all about making choices. That's all we're doing. And there was this transformative impact. So I did it for an entire year. And at the end of it, we needed it to go somewhere else. And so we approached Gavin Brown, who's a dealer in New York. And Gavin said...
I used to work for Gavin.
And Sophia worked for Gavin. I didn't have anything to do with this part. Gavin told you about it, and she made a very substantial investment in the program, so much so that that program was able to run at Brooklyn Museum borough-wide. And all of these kids that would have been in cells had an opportunity. So thank you.
Thank you. That's very sweet.
Wonderful.
Literally the least I can do.
Yeah.
And I think that, from what we spoke about, that really inspired you to kind of think about your hometown and your impact. And so I think the group would love to hear about CAM, and then we can open it up to questions.
Yes, so I'll tell you really quickly, in Memphis is where I grew up, I just kind of went back to put a ladder down where I came up. I like to say that, again, I thought I was doing it for selfish reasons. I actually applied to Skowhegan. You guys know Skowhegan? So I applied to Skowhegan. I was rejected, and this is my elaborate response. I thought I would go back to Memphis where we could have significant impact. If you know any of the numbers in Memphis in terms of education, it's not an easy situation. And I wanted to help kids that had artistic talent use that talent to get college scholarships. And so we spend 4 weeks together living in a bucolic environment for 3 weeks. They do painting, drawing, printmaking, sculpture. They get 6 college credits when they complete that. And then we go to New York and we visit artist studios. We go to collectors' homes. Is Abigail Goodman here? Say hello. Back. Say hi. So Abigail arranged our visit this year, and all of our 25 fellows are able to go to a collector's home. Believe it or not, some of our kids have never seen homes that look like the homes you guys live in. They've just never been in there. And so it's impactful for them to see that, to see our friendships. And then they come back and we work with them year-round to build strong portfolios so that they're competitive. We go to Pratt, we go to Cooper Union. We had one kid who won $400,000 in scholarships and started from a family that did not support art. So we're able to go into these families, and I'm able to leverage whatever I have to say, hey, this talent is important, and let's support it. And I'm also interested in who gets to become an artist. There was a great article in the New York Times a couple years ago that talked about the middle-class bias in art education because it's expensive to do. Yeah. And so the organization is called CAM, Contemporary Arts Memphis. We have a website. I don't love it, but we're making a new one. Visit it anyway. We have incredible people working in Memphis, and I'd love to talk to any of you about it that want to help us do this work.
Yeah, and it feels very poignant that we're here where we see this happening in Aspen, in a place that's extremely affluent, but having this kind of oasis for artists to come and, you know, be a part of the community is super special. So
Absolutely.
Thanks for all of this. I enjoyed chatting with you, and we'd love to hear from you guys now, if you have any questions.
Oh, hi. My name is Alma Salke. I did grow up in Memphis, Tennessee. That was one of the reasons I came today. I was wondering if the Brooks Museum has any of your pieces.
What a wonderful question. So, you know, this far west, we're cousins, right?
Yeah,
That's really cool. So I hope we get to chat. The Brooks Museum has been one of our most ardent supporters. They support the work we do at CAM. We have our end of year every year at the Brooks. The Brooks does have one of my works.
Oh, good.
There was a foundation, the Pyramid Peak Foundation, that did a lot of acquisitions over a period of time, and I'm part of that. So yes, I am very happy to be in the Brooks collection.
Terrific.
Thank you.
Raise your hand and we'll bring you a microphone.
Hi there. I do a lot of mentoring with inner city youth.
Wonderful.
I have one young man that went from Morehouse to Harvard.
Oh, wow.
I was curious to hear about your journey and how that impacted your art.
Oh, that's a great, first of all, thank you for the work that you're doing. Did everybody hear what she said? Does everybody know where Morehouse College is? Okay, so I have this thing with my wife, like she went to Yale, and so you know the endowment at Yale, right? Not small. And at Morehouse, we have this tiny endowment. And so we do a lot with a little. And, you know, I'm very proud of, you know, the Morehouse students that are able to go on. For me, I knew I wanted to go to Harvard, but the reasons are not noble. I knew I was going to be an artist. I have the affliction. I can't do anything else. I have these African parents. My one brother is a dentist, the other brother is a lobbyist. They're very good guys. They make money. And I was like, I'm going to be broke the rest of my life. But what I can do is have some educational attainment. So surface level, I just wanted to achieve as much as I could educationally, but they did have a wonderful program called Arts in Education. And I was able to study school models beyond the walls of traditional classrooms. And, you know, funny how life works that, you know, now I have a foundation doing that same work. So I learned how to think at Harvard. I learned how to write. At Morehouse, I learned who I was. And so a lot of the work that artists have to do to know who we are before we can show ourselves to the world, I was able to do through my educational path. way back.
Hi, I just wanted to follow up on what you just said. You said you knew you wanted to be an artist.
No, I
And-
said I can't do anything else.
Yeah.
Big difference.
But you mentioned when you were a kid.
Yes.
Do you remember the first time feeling like, oh boy, I got the bug?
Well, I didn't know anything about life. I was happy about it then.
Yeah.
You know, nobody cared about salaries or any of that. No, but I was 3 years old. I talk about this all the time, and I drew a fire truck, and I just saw how it changed the whole house. Like my mom put it up, and my dad, you know, took a knee and chatted with me. My older brother was nice to me. You know, I just saw the power of art, you know, very early. I also, from one of my better therapists, learned that as a child, I was attracted to art because it was a space where I could control all the factors. So if in the home, as a child, so many things are beyond your control, in the space of art, I make all the decisions. I have friends now that call me and say, I have a child that have artistic talent. What should I do? Tell me about a program. I said, do nothing. Leave them alone. Go away. Because
Hang it up.
yeah, hang it up. But that's where the kids find their power. So I think I found my power in making and creativity, and it is still how I stay sane. But it was a very early spark that I'm still riding on.
I'm going to skew off the riding on question and ask you how you became fascinated with jockeys and horses, and really talk a moment about the untold stories, and that's part of your practice, finding the untold stories and helping the rest of us see them.
Love that. I mean, we could do a talk just on my obsession with jockeys in horse racing. But when I first started showing my work, I really didn't have a show before I was 37. So for a long time, I just made work in private. But when I did get out there, there was this moment where black artists were really in vogue. And it felt like a trend, you know. And when I did interviews, they would ask me, well, how long do you think this moment is going to last? You know, and you can imagine, like, you know, how that felt. So I think I felt at a certain point that myself and a lot of my friends were being sort of like racehorses. We were being picked, you know, and like which one is going to go the distance, you know, and that's what it felt like. So my inquiry was really kind of surface. But then when I got into learn a little more about it, I learned that the first super athlete in America was the horse jockey, and that they were able to win prizes and purses. They even had some modicum of privilege during slavery because of their relationship to horses. And so the first 15 Kentucky Derbies, several of those winners were black jockeys. Then at the turn of the century, when racial strife hit fever pitch, they were yanked from the sport. And so, I mean, for like 100 years, I think there was like one jockey that raced recently. So I use that to point to American moments and my skepticism of momentary progress. And in fact, we don't have to look back very far to see the dynamics I'm talking about. When there is this moment of euphoric racial progress and passion for social movements, and then it recoils. And so my series on the black jockeys was cathartic, and I'm looking for something that I find to be very painfully true about our American experience. Thank you.